How's it going today? This video is going to be my top 10 books of 2021. I hope you are excited to see all of the books that I really enjoyed this year and which ones I think are notable to be in this list. So let's get into it. This list is always really hard to curate because either I didn't read a ton of amazing books or I read so many that it's just impossible to choose. Also, I apologize if you can hear my laundry in the background. We're making a trip soon, so I just wanted to make sure all of it's done. But anyways, I'm going to start from the bottom up. Some of these were pretty tied, so don't be too thrown off by the order in which they're at, except for what's at the bottom and what's at the top. So yeah, number 10 is a book that I do not have physically. I listened to the audiobook of The Guest List by Lucy Foley, or Foley, however you say that name, I'm sorry. I do plan on getting a copy of it eventually, but for now, I just listened to the audiobook. I really enjoyed this book. It's about a wedding that is taking place on this fancy island that is secluded, and it's misty and just really atmospheric. It's a mystery, I guess thriller, more mystery than anything, and they're trying to figure out who murdered someone, and it's like a whodunit. It makes you think this person did it and that person. And there's a lot of really messed up characters with a lot of messed up backstories and different mental states within that group. And it was just a very interesting story and character study, in my opinion. I don't necessarily love any of the characters. I think a lot of them were all of them were bad people. But I did enjoy reading about them and learning about everything. And it was just a really fun mystery that I enjoyed the ending of. Number 9 is Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna McGuire. This is a short little novella series. I just ordered the second book and it should be here very soon. I'm very excited about it. I'll be looking for the third. I do plan to continue it because it is so interesting. It's a fantasy mystery series, kind of. This one was about a girl who is moving into I guess like a school boarding house situation because she was in another world and she came back to the regular world and now she's trying to cope. So it's like these kids who get taken through magical doors like Narnia or down the rabbit hole like Alice, and they have to cope with being put back in their regular world. And some of them hope to go back and whatnot. And I think the rest of the books are going to be individual kids at this school and them in their worlds or something like that. But either way, it all leads back to the school. And this one was like a murder mystery of who killed some of the kids because they start being murdered. And it was really fun, really interesting story, and makes me want to continue on with the series. Number 8 on this list is Kira Kira by Cynthia Kadohata. This has won some awards for children's literature, which is very impressive. I got this in a blind date with a book very recently. I did it around Valentine's Day. I wanted to make like a big fancy video about it, but that did not end up happening because of life situations. But this was a really good middle grade. It was very deep, very dark. I cried like a baby, which many books don't make me cry. It's about a Japanese family who moved to the United States, and they go through a lot of racism. They go through a lot of hardships and poverty. They try to make ends meet. One of the sisters gets very sick, and it's the family coping with this and trying to make it through that life and tragedy of working at a chicken factory, and lots of things going on with the worker industry and how bad it was back then. And it was just very hard to read, but also beautiful and well written in the perspective of a small child growing up living in this world. So I highly recommend this if you are wanting something powerful but also lighthearted at the same time. It's very hard to explain, but it was fantastic. Number 7 is The Push by Ashley Audrain, a very popular book this year. I picked up a copy from someone who was selling theirs secondhand from Book of the Month. This is a thriller, very light thriller if you're gonna put it in that category, more of a suspense, I guess, about a mom who is unsure about her motherhood, and she has a child. The child does not seem to like her. She's really taking everything that this child says and does to heart, and you don't know if the mother is going through some postpartum or if she legitimately, the child hates her. So you're kind of going back and forth between, is there something wrong with the child, or is the mother really going through something here and needs some help? And I loved that dynamic. And then you finally see which one it is and the ramifications of the actions and the inactions of people around the mother, people who gaslight her. Her husband's terrible. People just act like she's crazy, and the child is going through some stuff on her own. And the ending line perfection. Absolutely loved this book. I understand why people might not like it, but I loved it. I listened to the audiobook. It was really, really good. Do recommend it. The next book on this list, number 6, is Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark. This is one that I've only seen one other person talk about on YouTube. Maybe I'm just in the wrong circles, but this is amazing. Very hard to jump through the language barrier, so I recommend listening to the audiobook or reading a sample of it before you buy the book, because it's a very thick Southern dialect, old Southern dialect, and it's gorgeously written, very fun to read. I could not put it down. It was a very fast read because it is kind of like a novella. It is a horror story about the Ku Klux Klan and how some of the members are monsters, and they turn into these really grotesque, it describes them very well, monsters, and eat people and dogs. It's really weird and creepy, but also very fun to read, and a very interesting commentary about racism and the way that people's minds are manipulated during all of that. Number 5 in this list is a sequel, Domino Falls. This is the sequel to Devil's Wake. I think I read that last year, and I've never heard anyone talk about these books, and it is technically supposed to be more than 2 books, but they have not continued, and I do not know if they will ever finish the series. But I really hope they do. Tanana Reevdu and Stephen Barnes are fantastic writers. This was a horror zombie story, and it had so many interesting and well-developed characters within it. We're following this group of black teens who are kind of misfits. They are going to a summer camp where they're supposed to help work, to kind of do community service of sorts, to make up for crimes or things they've gotten in trouble for. And they meet up, they're friends, they know they're going to see each other, but then at that time a zombie breakout happens. And there's a couple of other people who aren't going to this camp that also join the group, but it's just a group of misfits who get together, are survivors of this apocalypse. They're very young, and they have to survive and get around and find food and try to find another community of people. And in the second book, they find a housing group that is, you know, gated and protected to an extent. And they start living with them, and they know something's odd and something's up, and it gets into what the monsters and the zombies actually are and where they come from and what they're about. And it's really good. I love this book. I plan to reread it one day because I just love the description of the creature at the end. There is like a big reveal of what these monsters are, and it was so fun to read. Absolutely love this series. And if you're into zombie horror with lots of fun characters, I recommend this. It's also kind of funny. The next book is also an audiobook that I do not own yet. It is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I know, right? Like, who am I? I don't read Sylvia Plath. I think this was one that I just randomly picked on my way to work one day when I was driving back and forth for an hour commute. And I ended up loving it. I was entranced. For one, the audiobook was very odd and had the weirdest music to it. It just made me feel uneasy. And for some reason, I like things that make me feel that way when I'm in the right mood for them. And I cannot recommend this enough. If you are in a safe, stable mental place, listen to this book or read it. It is so depressing and sad and dark, but also I couldn't stop reading it or listening to it. I was so entranced with the way that Sylvia Plath put together this story that is not too far from her reality. Apparently some of the things in this book were heavily based in her real life, and that is so sad because a lot of really dark things happened to her in this book. Lots of trigger warnings. Be sure to look that up for yourself because it's been so long since I read it, I cannot remember every single one. But it is a beautiful book, and I highly recommend it if you can handle that and are interested in something a little older. I loved it. My third favorite book of the year would be My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. This was a surprise. I picked this up locally. Didn't think I would really know much about it. I just kind of dove into it knowing it was about slashers, hoping it would be good. And I love it. It is absolutely great. The writing had me unable to put the book down. I could not stop reading this. It was so fun. The main character is a girl who is obsessed with the slasher film genre, and she cannot stop talking about it to everyone she meets. She sounds a little insane. She might need some counseling because she is just so obsessed that her reality is just ingrained in slashers. And I identified with that to an extent, and I loved reading her essays that she was writing to her teacher. and just the wild stories that she came up with and the way that her mind worked. The only thing I didn't like about it was the ending, but everything else made up for that. It really took some turns there around when the action started happening. I did not expect that, so just be ready for some twists that you may not see coming in a way that I'm pretty sure you'll be surprised by. I don't think many people saw this happening the way that it did, but I liked it. I highly recommend. My number 2 book of the year is one that I know a lot of people have not loved, and that is The Shadows by Alex North. I really need to read more of Alex North's books because this was stunning. I just received this today. It's an audiobook I listened to, but I didn't have a copy, but I finally got it. I love this. It reminded me a lot of It mixed with Slender Man lore. So if those two things are something that you're very interested in, or just find passion about listening to stories about stuff like that, check this out. It's pretty short. I thought it was a lot longer than this, but apparently not. The audiobook felt really long. I checked the audiobook out from my library, so it was very, very fun thing to listen to on my way to and from work back then. And I am obsessed with it. It's these 4 boys, and something happens when they're younger because they come up with these dream journals because of this character called Red Hands, I think that's what he's called. And they try to talk with him in their dreams, and they have lucid dreams and dream journals, and one of the boys is the leader of the group, and he starts making them have like group delusions and things like that. That's all I'm gonna say. I don't want to spoil too much, but it gets very gruesome and very, very intriguing. There's a detective point of view in this that I didn't absolutely love, but it was not so heavily presentable in this that it took away from the story. So I've heard The Whisper Man's very similar, so I want to check that one out and see if it's just as good. And if you've read it, let me know in the comments, because I'm curious about more of this author's work, because this was so good. And my number 1 book of the year, I do not yet have a copy of. I'm hoping to find one very soon, one that looks good, because if it's my favorite book, I want to have a decent copy of it. One that I enjoy the way it looks. So that is You by Caroline Kepnes. Now, I know a lot of people really like this book, and I want to explain the reason that I like this book, and I hope that you won't judge me too hard because it seems a little messed up. The series on Netflix is pretty good. I've watched some of it. Have not completed it because I'm not a big TV person. This book, I could not tell you how much I think about this series. I haven't read any of the other ones yet because I'm scared it'll deflate how much I love this one. I think once I'm over how much I love this one, I might dive into the next ones. Our main character is a psychopath. He is a 100% awful human being who is a murderer. And we're going through the life of him being obsessed with this one girl, and the whole book is you. Like, you are the perspective. I think it's second person is what it's called. And so it feels like you're reading about yourself and this man who is just following you around. And the audiobook is narrated by someone who has a very sultry voice, so it's kind of like this creepy dude is saying things very sexy, and it's just odd. There's a lot of very vulgar language in this. The character of what's his name? I can't remember his name, but the main dude who's the stalker is obsessed with this woman. She's pretty and everything, but he is just unhealthily obsessed. Does a lot of really bad things to get into her home, into her life, to her family, friends, her boyfriend, everything. It just destroys everything about her, and you find out so many things about him and his past and his future. And I'm obsessed with this book because I was just like, everything about it was perfect. It to the T, even the nasty language and the way that he looks at women that is so toxic and just oogie. I loved listening to it because it was just so real, and I felt like a real person, you know? That was a real person I was listening to, not just a book. It really felt like the creator was this person, and they really knew what to write. It was just absolutely stunning. Loved every bit of it. 10 out of 10. Highly recommend you if you can handle like the stalker stuff, because I could imagine that being very triggering if you've dealt with something like that. But yeah, absolutely loved it. Cannot wait till I get my own copy to reread it someday. But yeah, that's my top 10 books for the year of 2021. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments below, and like this video and subscribe if you're new here. I have so many new end of the year videos to make, and I'm excited for the new year of 2022. Let's see what kind of stuff we can get into, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.